After going through this video, you will be able to explain arrays, define an array in JavaScript, explain push method and pop method, explain how for loop is used in an array with the help of an example. It is time to discuss one of my personal favorite topics, and that is arrays. You might think that we have already studied arrays in the previous module, that is PHP. So how is it different this time? Well, believe me, the scope that the arrays offer in JavaScript is much different from what we have learned in PHP. We will begin with a short and crisp introduction to arrays to see what we know about them so far. An array is a special type of variable that can store multiple values, provided they are of the same type. In PHP, we learned that there are two types of arrays. One is numeric indexed and the other is associative arrays. In JavaScript, there are only numeric indexed arrays and no associative arrays. The objects which we discussed in detail in the previous topic behave as an array but are more advanced than arrays. We will come to that in a while in this video. Now, before we proceed to see how arrays are defined in JavaScript, here is a task for you. I will give you a scenario and you have to define a numeric indexed array using PHP, which you have learned already. The variable name is modules, and to store the values inside this array, you can take them as the names of the first 4 modules of this training, that is HTML, CSS, Bootstrap and DBMS. You may pause the video to write it down and then we will match with the correct answer. So, this is how you might have defined the array using PHP. If we want to define this same array using JavaScript, the syntax is simple and almost similar to PHP. First, we define the variable using the let keyword, and then inside the square brackets, we define the values we want to store separated by commas. In JavaScript, to define an array, we don't use an array keyword when compared to PHP. Like in PHP, in JavaScript also, each value stored in an array corresponds to a particular array index starting with 0. Again, if we want to access any array element, we do that by using its array index inside a square bracket like this. So, module 0 will help us access the first array element, HTML. Module 1 will access CSS and so on. Also, arrays make it convenient to edit any existing array element or to add a completely new element to the array. Now, what is a new array? Well, we have now two Bootstrap, one at index 1 and another at index 2, and we have a new array element, PHP at index 4. This was some basic stuff which I believe you are already familiar with. Now, it is time to deep dive into arrays. And the first thing we will learn is that arrays are objects. JavaScript allows us to define arrays using objects. The syntax is simple. We define an array the way we create a new object, and all the array elements are passed as arguments. Here, instead of the keyword object, we must have array keyword, which means that there must be a class or a function constructor with the name array. This also means all the objects of the type array, including modules in this case, will contain some specific properties and methods. In fact, arrays in JavaScript are pure objects. It just allows us to define and use as primitive for easier use. Even when we define an array as primitive, it is still an object of the type array and can be used as one. Similarly, even if an array is defined as an object, we can access its elements as primitive using array indices. Next, every array in JavaScript has two methods, and they are push method and pop method. There are more methods, but these two methods are always present in every object of the type array. Let us understand the role of both these methods one by one. So, the push method allows us to add a new array element at the end of the array. Earlier, we defined this array where we had 4 elements. Now, if we want to add the 5th element PHP to this array, we can use the push method like this. This will add the PHP as the 5th element of the array. Next, we have the pop method. It fetches the last element of the array and then removes it from the array. So, we added a new element to this array a few moments back. Now, if we use pop method to this array, it will first fetch or select the last array element, that is PHP, and will remove this element from the array. This will again make the number of array elements as 4. Lastly, in this video, we will see for/of loops in arrays. If you remember, for/of loops are exclusively used in arrays, and it iterates through all the elements of the array. Let us have a look at an example. Here, we are iterating through the modules array and printing all its elements. The syntax is for a variable name of the name of the array we want to iterate through, which in this case is modules. The loop runs as many times as the number of elements in the array, and in each iteration it picks up one element of the array and assigns it to a variable for us to use. We can name this variable anything as we want. Now, what would be the output of this code? This is something you need to find out on your own. With this, we come to the end of this video. In the next video, we will continue to explore more concepts.